People that listen to our podcast, you know what they want to hear? They want to hear four grizzly bears getting down on some bullshit. That's what they want to hear.
Welcome to the Drivers Project podcast, featuring hosts Dominic Scelzi, JJ Hickel, Sam Hafertepe Jr., and myself, Daryl Turford. Well, fellas, we're back with another Drivers Project podcast presented by Kaiser Wheels. And we brought on the most recent NASCAR winner, because we know you guys are all massive NASCAR fans, Christopher Bell. Christopher, you certainly had to be happy with the weekend.
I was indeed, Daryl. Thank you guys for having me on here. It's always a pleasure. I love keeping up with all your guys' stuff on social media. It's you guys got a cool deal going on.
Sam, what did you get up this weekend? You were supposed to race, but that got killed, didn't it?
Yeah, we had TMS with Power Eye. That got canceled. Obviously, we had pretty cold weather over the weekend. Kind of felt like Canada down here. But they rescheduled it back to March 28th and 29th, so it's not all bad. We still don't really lose a race weekend out of it.
And Dom, you were too cool to do the show last week. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I took a quick trip to Iowa to see some customers and got to spend some time with my brother. And on the way home, I got to watch Chris win. Chris, have you seen these before? When's the last time you've seen some of these?
I saw those a couple weeks ago. Pretty sure I had to use some of those.
Welcome back to Dirt.
Hey, it is glad. I am just so glad to be back. So glad to be back. All is right in the world.
So there's about 100 topics we could cover. And I wasn't going to do your story, but I kind of want to do the important parts of your story that I don't think have really been talked about. The first one I want to cover, I actually want to talk to Sam about this one. Sam, could you kind of explain where Rick Ferkel was at when he decided to give Christopher Bell a shot in a sprint car, and how it went over when he showed up at Rick's house?
I'm excited to hear this. I am excited to hear this.
From what I remember, kind of Rick at the time, I don't think people realize how old school Rick was. So it's kind of hard to explain unless you really know Rick. But, we would always stay at his place whenever I raced in Ohio. And he was trying to run his car still at that time. And he had a bunch of guys come in and get it, go in and out, and never really had, like anything solid ever. Rick thought they should be running better than they were, and he never felt like he got it.
Was it the car or was it the driver?
Well, I mean, there could be a lot of things to say, like in respect to Rick. And just being truthful, like Rick was so hard-headed, like to stay up with some of the new coming technology and stuff like that. So I feel like some of the bigger racetracks, they were probably at a disadvantage. But, your Atticas, your Fremonts, and Christopher could tell you, like when he drove Rick's car, they were probably pretty spot on a lot of the time. I just don't think, for a guy like Rick, he needed a guy to hustle the car. That's what he wanted. And I feel like a guy that wouldn't hustle the car probably wasn't going to be a guy that was going to be good for Rick. So Rick was just one of those guys at that time where he was trying to find a guy that would fit in the seat for him. And I don't ever feel like he matched up with any guy. And he told me, he goes, well, Sam, I got this young kid. He's coming up here from Oklahoma. I was like, well, who is he? And I didn't know who Christopher Bell was at the time. I didn't follow micro stuff. I didn't know. And he's like, yeah, he says he's 16 or something.
I'll pick it up from here. This is the part that Sam doesn't remember. Sam is right. Rick needed a gasser, but Rick was very, very, very depressed at the time. He had 2 or 3 drivers in the car, and he was basically ready to give up when a friend of his from Oklahoma told him he had an 18-year-old kid ready to drive Rick's car. And then Christopher Bell showed up, And Christopher Bell is tall now, but at the time, Christopher Bell was not tall. He still had the baby face and showed up in glasses. And you could take it from there, Christopher.
Oh my gosh, Daryl, I'll never forget this, man. Never forget this. So Wade Wisely was the mutual friend who talked to Rick. And Wade sold him on the fact that I was 18. I could drive a sprint car. I'd never driven a sprint car, give him a shot. So we roll up to Ohio, myself and Billy Lawhead, who was working on my micros with me. And we show up on a Friday morning. And our plan was just to run Attica on Saturday night. It was in August and the fair stuff was going on. Attica normally runs Friday, but it's running a Saturday. So we showed up Friday morning. Plan was to get fitted in the car, race Saturday. So we roll up and his dog always sat in his little Chevy S10 right out front. Sam, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Meanest dog in the world.
Yes. So we roll up and Brutus goes nuts whenever people or guys walk by the truck. And Rick's like, the first thing he says, he doesn't even say like, hi. He doesn't say, how old are you? He goes, you're not 18. And I said, no, I'm not. I never told you I was 18 either. He goes, how old are you? And I told him I'm 16. And you could just, he was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into here? And I at that point, it's like, all right, well, I guess he's here. We're going to give it a go and see how it goes.
He actually called Sam and was like, should I run this kid?
He called him that day that I showed up.
Yeah, we were right down the street, parked in the parking lot.
That's right. Where did you guys race that night on that Friday night?
I don't know. I don't know where we would have went. I know we went somewhere.
I remember, because you won the next night at Attica on Saturday. I remember that.
Yep. But he calls me. He's like, I don't know if I should race him, Sammy. And I'm like, well, he's all the way up here. He drove all the way up here. You might as well give him a chance, And I remember after the first night, I came back the next week and he goes, I think he might be okay. That was his word. I think he might be okay. That was his word.
Oh,
so was that the first time ever in a sprint car?
What?
Yeah.
That was your
And Christopher's description of it, like he'll tell here, is great.
Yeah. But anyway, I show up Friday morning and I asked Rick, I said, hey, there's nowhere we can go to race tonight. And he's like, no, there's not, the fair's going on. And then he was originally planning on going to help someone at Lima at a 360 race that night. And then he called up old Shirley Kears. And he's like, hey, is there anywhere racing? And Shirley told him that Wayne County was running their local show. So we ended up going to Wayne County on Friday night. And I remember like sitting in the car for engine heat. You went out on the track and they wanted you to pull off right away, but I made an extra lap. But my foot, I didn't even put it on the accelerator. I'm just letting this thing idle around the racetrack. I'm so nervous. Never driven a sprint car before in my life. I'd run 5 midget races in my career in a Fontana, really old midget engine. So had really never experienced horsepower before. And I come in and from engine heat and I get out of the car because no one had taught me anything different. I get out of the car and Rick, he leans into the car, leans down the fuel tap. I'm pretty sure he's in there holding the accelerator to get the RPM up a little bit. And so I didn't start off on the right foot. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you getting out of the car? You got to, get engine heat in it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I didn't know. So yeah, it was, we weren't off to a great start, but the race thankfully ended up going okay that night at Wayne County.
Well, now I got to know, how did you do?
Gosh, hang on one second.
I thought you ran 5th.
You ran 5th.
Yeah. I did run 5th. And I found the results. The results are online. They're on that. It might be that sprint car rating website or something. I took a picture of it so that I'll have it forever. I did. I ran 5th, my first ever time in the car. And I think it was his best run that year. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah, it would have been. And I want to say the next night did you run 3rd?
No, I spun out. I spun out at the start of the race. It was so we went to Wayne County and I ran 5th, and then I went to Attica, and I remember I spun out the first lap of the feature, and I had to watch. And I watched you freaking beat this monster ass curve at Attica that it doesn't build anymore.
Yeah.
But you were full hero mode on this curve at Attica, just slaughtering these guys.
If you asked anyone in the ASCS now if Sam ran a curb, they wouldn't believe you.
Yeah.
And that's probably the last time Sam even thought about getting up to the top.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have to, you might as well not do it, right?
1 from 13th.
I do remember that. That was awesome. And Sam always parked his rig right down the road in the Big Lots parking lot. So they would walk up and down to the house.
So I remember back when you were running micros, and I was
having out, Dom.
Yeah, oh yeah, all the time. I'd always watch you when you'd iRace. You'd text me like, "Hey, I'm iRacing some Australian race," and I'd be up at like 3 a.m. watching you run a midget on iRacing, and like I remember when you won that race at SIR, we were having engine problems, and I messaged you on Facebook. I'm like, "Hey man, like who builds your engines?" And you're like, "You need to go to Brady at Metric Cycle." And then I started getting all our engines from Brady, and then we became buddies that way. So like it's kind of wild just watching your career progress, and now it's like you're the nightmare monster in Kyle Larson's dreams. It's just hilarious.
Dude, I'll never forget the shootout, man. Like literally, we had like a bromance going on at the shootout that year. I forget what was like 2009 or 2010. Me and Dom Scelzi, buddy, we're homies.
So that race Dominic is referring to, in the early days of meeting you, you couldn't show people the YouTube video of that race it was at SIR, right? It was a $10,000 to win micro race that you won after a massive battle. Was that the first time you really realized you could actually make pretty decent money at racing? Because I'm actually going to come back to this later.
Yeah, definitely. So that was the first time that I like made real money. So I ran for my parents whenever I started when I was 6 until I was like 15. And then I started driving for Darren Rustin. And Darren gave me a percentage of the purse. It was like 25%. It was either 20 or 25% of the purse. And basically, micro races paid whatever, $300 to win, $500 to win. And I would get whatever 25% of that is, basically give me lunch money to eat on for the rest of the week. Right. And then whenever I won that 10,000 to win race, that was like my first check I got. I got $2,500 of this $10,000. And I opened up my first ever bank account with it. And that was like, man, this is nice. Whenever you're a kid, a little bit of money goes a long way. You're like $2,500. I can eat forever. I can go buy something. So that was the first time I ever made money driving a race car.
So one of the first things I remember about Rick's with you, Dom's already talked about it, was you would get in from the day with Rick, and you would go lock yourself in the room, and you would play R Factor till like 4 a.m. Could you talk about that group of people you were racing? Because I remember coming in one day just to see what the heck you were doing. And do you think, like when I think back to who was in that group, and that you guys are the first generation of really simulation racers, how important was that group to your development, do you think?
Well, so I looking back at it, I think it was kind of a hidden secret towards our success. And our friend group that we had ended up being like, pretty elite race car drivers like myself. Logan Seavey was in there. Larson was kind of in that group before me. I know like Larson and Kevin Swindell, they used to always race online a lot. So like my group was myself, Logan, I can't even remember. There's a really, really good Australian guy that was always racing with us too. I forget his name, but he just won the Classic a couple years ago.
I remember Ferkel being in the group.
Yeah, Andrew Felker's in there, Tyler Thomas. But what it did was we were just hanging out with our buds, and like literally every night we would race online. Like there was no Call of Duty, there was no Fortnite or anything. Like that's how we spent our time, was playing R Factor and just racing. And it's not real driving, but it kept us in racing situations, and we loved it. So I think that was probably a key to some of my success.
And that's actually where you won your first Chili Bowl, was it not?
I don't know that I ever won the R Factor Chili Bowl.
Yes, you did. You won it for $50. You were so excited over Chase Cabre.
I do remember Chase Cabre won a lot of those things, so I don't remember myself winning them.
You were all excited. You made me watch the video. You definitely won it for $50.
I'll take your word for it.
Daryl remembers a lot of shit that people don't remember.
Yeah. Daryl is that guy.
The reason I remember it is because when Christopher came and helped us in Florida, he was all excited because the Chase Cabre kid was coming to meet him. Like they were meeting.
Yep, I do remember that now. I
remember it. In the Ohio area, you started to pick up notoriety, but the rest of the nation didn't really know who you were. You started to pick up some ASCS rides. You actually ran up at Sam's big race, his 12,000 to win race. You ran really good at Devil's Bowl, but to me, the night when you gained national attention was the short track nationals, where in most people's eyes, you showed up out of nowhere and almost won that race. Could you kind of take us through that?
So, Daryl, I love looking back at this, and like I've had a couple, young kids come up to me and kind of ask for advice, getting going in racing. And the way that I look back at it is my career transpired because of certain key moments, right? And all you're doing is you're just preparing for those moments, and you never know when those moments are coming. But that 10,000 to win micro race, that was a moment. The short track nationals, that was a moment. And then, there's just these moments, and you're preparing for those moments, right? So you mentioned all of those ASCS races that I did, and really even the races with Rick. Like all that's doing is giving me seat time and preparing for this moment that came at Little Rock. And yeah, you hit it exactly right. That was the first time that I had a showing in a national stage, and I didn't even win the race. I led some of it and got beat by Paul McMahon in the Donnie Cooper 01. But I ran in Ohio for Rick, and there was an Ohio 305 team that was planning on going to Little Rock, and Caleb Griffith was their driver. He got hurt earlier at the end of the season, so he wasn't able to go. So they called Rick and asked if I would drive it. So I got the call to run the 40 double D short track nationals, and we had a great showing, and that was kind of my first welcome to the party moment.
So Sam, we also had a pretty memorable short track nationals. Do you want to tell people what happened with us?
I've had a lot of memorable ones. Was that the
Danny
year
Wood.
The Danny Wood one?
Yes.
Yeah, it was probably not one of my proudest moments in my career.
We'd gone 9th to 2nd in our heat.
We probably, honestly, during this time, we probably had the car to win that race quite a few years in a row, it seemed like. But I would always do something to lose the race for myself. And this year looked like we were right on our way, like we were about to be high point guy through the heats and the qualifiers. And Danny Wood he was just coming off of turn 4 every lap, just all the way out to the wall and chopping my front end off. So I'd have to stab the brake. And I only went 6th to 4th in the heat. And if I would have went 6th to 3rd, I would have been on the pole the prelim, probably go off and win the prelim. Well, I'm so mad after the heat race that I go to hit.
You getting mad, Sam?
Oh, yeah. I go to hit Danny Wood in the left front with my right rear. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be fine. I'm going to knock his front end out. I'm going to feel better about it, and I'm going to go back to my pits. Well, I didn't knock his front end out, and I hit him so wrong that I ended up turning over after the checkered's over, like we're a lap after the checkered's over. And I get back to the trailer. They tow us back, and my dad doesn't even see what happened. He goes,
I didn't see what happened.
No, I think everybody had finally, they had walked away, like the race is over. And my dad goes, well, what the hell did you do? Did you wreck in the pits? And I'm like, no, it was way worse than that, you know? And I don't even remember what happened. I think we salvaged what did we run, like?
We were the first car to miss or something.
Yeah, I think we ran third in the prelim. And
but we bent the frame.
What we're scrambling, I'm trying to scramble back because we're so high in points. Like we don't have to run, anything. So we're in the A. So I'm like, man, knock the ladder out of this thing. So we're in their square and we're trying to square. And they're like, they're all, what's wrong, Sam? Like I should have it square by now, and I don't have it square. And they're like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I said, don't you say shit to my dad. I said, but the frame's bent. I said, we're going to get this back together and we're going to run the race. And we started sixth and we ran third. And it was just, it was one of those deals. Like, I was young enough to where I thought doing that was the right thing. And clearly it wasn't. Obviously I'm not Sammy Swindell and know how to hit somebody with my race car and get an advantage over it. But, no, it was a big deal. Probably. What's that?
I mean, you got NASCAR drivers doing that stuff now, flipping guys. So I mean, it must have worked.
No, it was really dumb. It was really bad, and it's probably after that happened. I won't say I don't swerve at people now or do things, but I never ever try to do that anymore because I know how bad it worked out for me that night.
So, Christopher, you went on to run second in that race. If I remember right, you led till about lap 26, and Paul McMahon either found rubber or a faster line and got you.
Yeah.
But I have also talked to Pete Willoughby, and that is the night they discovered you. Is that correct, Keith Kunz Motorsports?
It kind of. So before I went to run for Ferkel, before I went to go run for Ferkel, I was doing some midget stuff as well, and I ended up parking beside Keith and Pete at the Gold Crown Nationals at Tri-City, and they recognized me because I looked like little Jason Myers, and that's what originally caught their attention. They're like, "Holy crap, this kid looks like Jason Myers. Is he any good? We don't know." And I, ran a race with Larson. He was in their house car and I kept up with him. I didn't beat him or anything, but I kept up with him and they're like, oh, okay, well, he's, doing okay. And then fast forward to the Little Rock, which was, I think, a year later. They're like, oh, that's mini Jason Myers. He just ran second here. So yeah, that was just, putting all the pieces together and yeah.
So that off season, you got an opportunity to race the Chili Bowl for Keith Kunz. But There was a dilemma.
There was a huge dilemma, a huge life dilemma that I confided in Sam that week at the Chili Bowl about.
Yeah, you came to our trailer probably 3 or 4 times that weekend. Could you kind of talk people through why you were doing that?
Yeah, so the Chili Bowl, it would have been Chili Bowl of 2013. So I just run Short Track Nationals in 2012, ran second. And then Keith and Pete hired me to run the Chili Bowl in 2013. And it was a Chili Bowl only deal. So I had already agreed upon to run the full All-Stars with Rick in 2013. And whether or not we would have made it all year, that was debatable. But we were... like a couple weeks later, we were supposed to go to Screven, Georgia to kick off our season. And I was jazzed, right? Got this full-time sprint car ride. We're going all-star racing. Rick was jazzed. He's got this young kid. And I remember I ran my prelim night, which was on Wednesday at the Chili Bowl. And on the next day, actually, it might have even been before my prelim night, but Pete took me up in the grandstands. He set me down. He's like, hey, man, Larson's leaving. We want you to be our guy. We need someone to chase the championship. We need someone to help, sell our rides. We want you to be our guy. And I'm like, Pete, I can't do that, man. I can't do that. I'm going sprint car racing with Ferkel. We're going to Screven, Georgia. Like, it was literally 2 weeks later. I don't think I can do that. He's like, Christopher, you need to think about this. This could be a life-changing decision for you. So yeah, I confided in Sam, and it's funny to this day because Rick tells everybody, and he told me that, like, he told me back then that I needed to go do it. I needed to go do it, but he did not tell me that. He was mad at me whenever I decided, or whenever Sam, said that it's something I should probably do. And I called Rick, and he was mad. He was mad for a little bit that I ended up bailing on him.
Yeah, and for the record, Sam and I were saying to take the goddamn ride, and that
it was basically like, man, I don't know what you're thinking, but you need to change your thoughts. He would walk out. Might actually get you somewhere. The 410 deal might not.
So Sam, honestly, I truly to this day, your input is what steered me in that direction. Like, I was very committed to go run the All-Stars with Rick. Like, that's where my heart was. That's what I was going to do. I didn't even think anything past midgets. I'm like, why would I go run a USAC midget? Like, that's not, I have an opportunity to go run the All-Star sprint cars, and hopefully, that leads to an outlaw ride or a USAC midget. Like, how does this work? But your guidance changed my career path and my life forever.
I still remember him walking out of the trailer and Sam and I shaking our heads like, how does he not know what to do here?
Well, I'm glad you...
I've lost so much respect for you knowing that you took his advice on anything. Luckily it was the right advice, but my gosh, I wouldn't trust Sam with anything.
So Sam was like my mentor, man. So like he was rough around the edges to me. Did you know you were, Sam?
No. Well, I mean, I rub people the wrong way quite often. So, I mean, you'll have that.
I'm this 16-year-old kid that's like trying to find a mentor sprint car racing, and Sam is like he's this like established sprint car racer, and I'd been around him a lot because of Ferkel. And, we were around each other whenever I was up there driving his car. And then I went to Florida with you guys. And I think we had that Florida deal planned out even before I got the Pete deal.
Yes, my dad drove you to your first midget race at Coons.
Yep.
From Volusia.
That's right. My dad took me down to Sam's house, and I rode in the rig with you guys.
Yeah.
My plan, I don't know if I had a seat with me or not, but I know I was.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you brought the seat.
Yeah, I was trying to race. I'm like, Sam, I'll go down there and scrape some mud on your car, but if I find a ride, I'm going to try and race. And I'll tell you what, I remember this. So at Volusia, the Mondak Portables car, I was trying my ass off to get in that thing. I forget who was driving it at the time.
Probably Jamie Barnes, I bet, was probably, because that would have been early stage. I think it was Jamie Barnes.
Yes, I was trying my ass off to get in that thing. And I thought I had it worked out too, but it didn't work out.
It was funny because before we were going down there, my dad's like, why is he bringing the seat? I go, I guess he thinks he's going to find a ride down there. My dad goes, there's nobody giving out rides at Volusia. And I'm like, he goes, if they're going down there, they already got a driver. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I said, but he's still bringing the seat.
Oh, yes.
So in that first year, you had a bunch of success with Coons, but as your decision showed, you were still naive. And I remember picking you up at the airport. Sam was running the Rudine 26 car, and you came in to run Devil's Bowl, an ASCS show, and I picked you up at the airport. And after I dropped you off at the airport, you looked at me and said, Daryl, I don't know what I got to do, man, but I have got to become a professional race car driver. And I said, Christopher, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, Christopher, just off wins, you've won $60,000 this year. You are a professional race car driver. How long do you think you had that naivety, and when do you think you sort of lost that?
Man, I don't know. I remember that first year in 2013, like that was whenever I really started to make money. Like 2012 was the year that I I don't know. I was a kid, right? You're making whatever, $500. But 2013, I started to make real money because I was winning races, winning midget races. I won a couple non-wing sprint car races, and ran well in wing sprint cars. And so it was 2013 whenever it's like, man, I'm doing it. I'm racing for a living, buddy.
So it is important to mention Rick passed away roughly a year ago, and we were putting together a photo album of Rick. And when we asked you to choose like your favorite photo, you basically picked a photo that I think might even be in the background right now. It was of you and Rick winning a 410 race at Fremont. So you did actually win a race together. Yes. And I know that race means a lot to you. Could you kind of tell people about that?
Yeah, I got it. Hang on one second. I'll be right back. I got it right here. It's not behind me, but I don't know if it's going to show or not. Yeah. So I ran for Rick through 2011. That's whenever I first met Sam. And then 2012, I ran full time for him the last half of the season. And I never won in 2012, but I should have won. I should have won a couple of them, and I was young and dumb and screwed them up. But then in 2013, whenever I started running the USAC midget deal, I came back during off weeks and would run for Rick. And that is the only race that I ever won for Rick, was at Fremont Speedway. And yeah, that is the most special win of my career. I got the trophy literally right behind me. I look at it every day.
Beautiful. So you get with Coons, you have a bunch of success, but now you're also getting sprint car rides here and there still.
Yep.
And you end up with the Fox brothers, and you guys roll into Jacksonville with the World of Outlaws. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was cool. You were there with Wayne Johnson. Remember that?
We were on the pole of the race, and you were starting outside.
Yep, with Rick working on the car.
Yes,
it was you and Rick working on Wayne Johnson's car. So it was awesome, man. Whenever I got the Coons ride, it was so cool seeing how many other opportunities came along with it. Like there were a bunch of people. The Fox brothers were one of them that like paid attention to who Coons was hiring, and I remember I drove for Jared Fox in an on-wing car. I drove for Brad and Steve in a wing car. Got the Roth ride. I never drove for Roth wing, but I ran non-wing for him. And
I was your tire guy. I remember that at Calistoga.
Say that again, Dom?
Too. It was at Calistoga. I did tires that weekend.
Yep.
I was there too.
So the Brad and Steve Fox car, it worked out perfect because they only wanted to run like 20 races, and it fit really good with my midget schedule. And we won a couple MOA races, and we ran like we ran a couple smaller races, but basically all the outlaw shows that came around Indiana, Eldora, a little bit in Ohio. But yeah, going to Jacksonville, Illinois, man, that was my first ever outlaw win. They hit it. Like the car drove really good, and I hammered the fence and didn't get a flat right rear. And that was a good day.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what was going on with Coons at the time. And what was going on with Coons at the time was basically a lot of winning and 3 straight Chili Bowls. Obviously, growing up from Oklahoma, that's obviously what you wanted to win. That to you would always say was your Knoxville Nationals. You've told people a million times what it meant to you. Do you just have any vivid memories or things that stick with you from those 3 wins?
Yeah. Well, so I didn't win my first Chili Bowl until 2017, and my first year with Coons was in 2013. So it was some time. Like I ran my first truck series in 2016. So I had already moved on from Keith Coons Motorsports, or full-time racing at Keith Coons Motorsports, before I won that first Chili Bowl. But it was just a really big deal to me. Like, I'm sure, Dom, is that Trophy Cup for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like it's the race. I I remember going there as a kid and like, getting autographs from all the drivers and just being a fan of it. So it was a big deal for me to win the Chili Bowl.
And at roughly the same time, around 17 or 18, you started racing a winged sprint car for Tony Stewart.
Yes.
And I actually forgot how good you were. Like, I started going through to get footage for this, and you guys at Eldora were downright badass. Can you talk about racing for Tony? And I'm sure Dom wants to know your impressions of racing with Jimmy Carr.
Dude, Dom.
I can't forget any of it because every day in the shop, that's what I hear. Oh, yeah, when we went to, wherever it was, where was it? Kokomo, you won the All-Star show with Jimmy. And, he talks about Kokomo and how badass you guys were every night at Eldora. And I remember it a little bit because I was just starting to race back there. But, dude, I'm telling you, Jimmy, he talks about that little time period all the time.
You don't understand how happy that makes me, Dom. That makes me so incredibly happy.
You've got to ride in the 41 whenever you want one because Jimmy, he can make a car ready for you.
So that was a huge deal for me getting in the TSR car because whenever I was trying to patch sprint car rides together, like I never really had a consistent ride. The most consistent ride I had was the Fox Brothers car. And like, it's just, I'm always jumping in this car for a night or two and this car for a night or two. And it was hard for me to put something together, and no disrespect to any of the car owners that I had, but it wasn't like an A-level ride by any means. So getting in that TSR 14 was like my first opportunity in an A-level, wing sprint car. And it was just so much fun. And obviously Tony is an idol of mine. I dream of, I think all of us probably dreamed of racing the TSR 14 or 15 back in the day. And we killed it, man. The thing was just, it operated around Eldora. We went everywhere we went. I went to Eldora. I went to Volusia. I did Kokomo with it. I think those were the only races that I did, but it was really fast.
360 Nationals, I think. Did you do a Nationals too?
I did do 360 Nationals, and we attempted the 410 Nationals. I sucked at Knoxville. I don't know why, but I have never done good at Knoxville. Yeah,
that was one thing that honestly, like with your career, it honestly always bothered me is why you didn't get a badass ride, like a permanent deal. I never ever could figure it out. A lot of other guys usually get something going their way, if they're at the level you were at that time. I always wondered that, but I also thought that's also why you made it to where you made it. Like I feel like if you would have got like, say, an opportunity like Buddy got with Roth, like you wouldn't have passed that up. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't have passed up a full-time badass ride on the Outlaw Tour. And I think honestly, that was one of the reasons you made it to where you made it. Like if you would have got given that opportunity just straight out of Coons going into, some type of 410 deal, maybe you don't ever see NASCAR. I don't know. I think that really would have changed the path that you went to where you are now.
That's a really good point, Sam. I totally agree.
So, talking about that, I was at Coons working on one of the cars, and you were starting to do NASCAR negotiations, and you guys were trying to be super quiet about it, but you were about 10 feet from me, so I was obviously listening to all of it while pretending to change a gear or something. And at the time, you were being advised by some people to maybe look at Ford. Yes. You ended up going with Toyota. Could you kind of talk through that process of, because Ford had a direct line to a Cup ride, whereas Toyota actually didn't. Could you kind of talk about why you stayed with Toyota, even though there was a direct line to Cup with Ford?
Yeah. So I still have the contract on my phone that my first ever Toyota contract and my first, that never happened, my contract offer that I got from Roush. And that contract that I had from Roush spelled out all of my salaries, what I was going to make each year, where I was going to go, what series I was going to do. And it spelled it out. Like the first year I was going to do ARCA. I was going to go ARCA racing and then truck racing, Xfinity racing, and then into the Cup car. And it literally spelled it out year by year where I was going to go. And the Toyota guys, they didn't have that path available for me. And the only thing that they could just tell me is that, we're not going to let you down. We're not going to let you down. We don't know how it's going to work out, but as long as you perform, then we're not going to let you down. And Pete really steered me in that direction to, stay with them. They bought in, with me from day one. And I remember my options, it was going into 2015. I could either sign up to run full-time ARCA in 2015, or I could stay with Toyota. And they guaranteed me, I think it was 10 or 15 late model races. And the breaking deal for me was, I said, okay, well, if you can just get me this Eldora truck race, I will stay with you guys. If I can get 15 late model races, I'll do the late model races, and then this Eldora truck race. And that's what it ended up being. I went with Toyota because they gave me the late model races and that truck race at Eldora.
So I mostly wanted to take people through some interesting points of your career that most people haven't really heard. But I wanted the second half to be more racer talk with you, Sam, and Dom. So I was
wondering when you were going to let me and Dom talk, Daryl.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess really the last question I have is, when you were coming up, I remember you used to idolize Kyle Larson. And I used to call you Lyle Carson, and it used to drive you nuts. Then he became pretty much your number one rival, to the point where when you guys show up in Volusia now, you guys are rivals. Could you talk about that? I don't know if you call it a relationship. I don't know what you call it. Could you?
Yeah, explain all of it. Explain all of it.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's so unique because Kyle and I essentially followed him, right? I followed him, and we spent a little bit of time around each other whenever he would come back and run midgets, whenever I was full-time at Coons. I remember I lived at Pete's house. He come and stayed there, and I think we went on the lake a couple days or whatever. But him and I our personalities are very different. We don't really have a lot of common interests. I remember back then, he loved to go out and party and drink, and I didn't do that. I'm kind of more of a nerd. I've just played on my computer and raced online. So, we didn't have a lot of common interests, so we never really became super good friends or really friends at all. But we certainly respect each other, and we would talk to each other around the racetrack. And, it as we became more competitive, it seemed like it kind of, I don't know, just maybe just we're not going to be super friendly to each other whenever we're, competing against each other all the time. But it's definitely a mutual respect between us. And I don't know, it's just ironic that a lot of the races come down to me and him for sure.
Yeah. So when you guys were racing shootout this year and you won, and it looked like he might have a chance to get you at the end. In the post race, he said, "Man, I just hate running second to Bell." I was like, "Man, that's. Obviously he wouldn't want to run second to anybody, but it seemed like that really ruffled his feathers that he did run second to you." And I know you're not that kind of guy, but in turn, I know you don't want to run second to anybody, but does it? I guess when we talk about a rivalry, for him, it sounds like it kind of is. And for you, I don't know, what is it to you? If he beats you, obviously you've got the better of him at most of the Chili Bowls through the years, but what is it? Is it the same feeling to you on the other side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that's unique about Kyle is, or our dynamic is, we are kind of opposite. I talked about his lifestyle a little bit, and that kind of translates to the racetrack. Kyle is just this guy that's right foot down, letting her hang out, just on the verge of out of control at all times. And I've always said that that's Kyle's strength. Of his 100% is everyone else's 120. And that's how he's allowed to, get such good pace out of his car and make the moves that he makes. And my driving style is just much more calculated and being precise and smooth. And our styles are just completely different. And if you look back at the shootout, like that was a really good example of it, right? Like the race played out for me to have the track position, and I'm running this conservative, smooth line that is it won the race, and Kyle is on offense, just doing what Kyle does, right? Like just putting caution to the wind, and like, I'm going to wear this thing out, but he doesn't wear it out because he's the best driver in the world.
That was my other question. So do you think he is the best race car driver out there? Do you think he is?
I undoubtedly, and I don't think anybody will argue this, that he has the most raw talent out of any driver in at least the modern era. It's just his ability to be in control whenever it's out of control is unparalleled.
And the only reason I asked that, and I'm going to let you go, Don, but the only reason I asked that, we had some people write, when we did that clip of Chris, we did a clip of you leading the last 3 laps on the last restart of Volusia. We did a clip, and I said, I had commentary on the clip as we're going, and we had people write in there, oh well, they said, oh well, Christopher Bell's way better than Kyle Larson, and Kyle Larson will even tell you that, and then somebody else,
he says that to deflect the heat, right? To put the pressure on me or whatever.
But there was banter back and forth. So like what Daryl needs to do is play what you said, so then we can get more banter.
Yeah. I mean, our styles they're different, man. They are different for sure.
Dom, you had a question.
Yeah. So like, I guess, Beans, I'm just a little bit younger than both those guys. I got to, like, I
look
found
4
Kyle.
years older than them.
I know, and I got 7 kids, and I work 5 jobs, and I'm a coal miner and all that stuff. But I got gray in my beard now. I'm not even 30, and I got gray.
I can't even grow a beard.
I got something right there.
You had a beard when you were 6.
Yeah, I could. I was buying beer for Christopher before he even had glasses. But so I found Kyle when I was a kid. Like, I mean, I was young. His mom would post videos on YouTube, and he slides these guys like with 1 lap to go and wins this big perpetual outlaw kart trophy. And I remember, and you can ask my brother. He'll tell you the same story. Is we would watch his videos, and we would tell like all our friends, my dad, this Kyle Larson kid is amazing. Like, he's going to be really good. Well, then years go on, and he comes and races micros with us, and then he's racing sprint cars, and he's a California kid, so we follow him. Well, I found Chris, back when he won at SIR, and I followed him, and like we became buddies. So watching the two of them come up, and like I got to watch my brother, who I think is incredibly talented, and then Corey Day, who I think is one of those specials. But the 3 most talented drivers I've seen in my entire life, without question, is Kyle and Christopher. Those are the top 2. And then I think Corey's their number 3. But watching the 2 of them drive, it's so different. What blows me away is I don't think that Kyle's better than Chris, and I don't think Chris is better than Kyle. But what blows me away, this is a long story here that I'm getting off on, but what blows me away is the time that you spent away from dirt track racing, I think took more away from you than just the fun. I think it took away people realizing, like, there was a point in time where you had Kyle's number no matter where you were at. And I think that you cut Kyle's, success maybe in half if you were able to run all the sprint car stuff and midget stuff that he's been able to do. So now that you're back, I think we're seeing it again now with the Cup cars. The story of you two guys, you're the 2 most talented race car drivers of this generation and of my lifetime so far. So it's incredible to see now you guys are racing everywhere.
Yeah, I mean that means the world to me, Dom, and I sincerely appreciate that. And I don't know what would have happened, right when I quit racing, but certainly, yeah, I mean that right whenever I quit racing was whenever Kyle really boomed, right? And I'm excited about getting the opportunity to race more now. And I was shocked whenever I got back in at Volusia, how I was really nervous whenever I went to Volusia, because I had no idea how I was going to feel in the car, if like it was going to feel super like fast and like you're racing and fast forward. But whenever I got in that thing, man, it felt like I was in the car last week, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, it just like instantly, it was right there.
So I know this is where Sam nerds out, because he always wants to hear how people felt in the 69K because of how hard it is to get cars handling nice now. Could you kind of talk about how the 69K felt?
Yeah, so it honestly reminded me exactly of the 14 whenever I ran the 14 at Eldora and at Volusia. To this day, I think that Jimmy Carr and now Don Kreitz are the two best crew chiefs that I've ever driven for. And the best way that I can describe it is like, it was always turning left at Volusia. Now I've only ran one track, but at Volusia, it was always turning left. And that feeling of turning left is very comfortable, right? Like the thing is smashed left. It's not getting up on the right. It's smashed left. It's turning left. All I'm doing is just kind of counter steering a little bit. And as the track slowed down and slicked off, he was able to apply grip to the car. Like, I don't even want to use the term tightening up, because the car continued to turn left. Like, it would always turn left, but he was adding grip to it so that I wouldn't wheel spin and I wouldn't be, down and out. And that was what was so eye-opening to me and what made it so friendly to drive. And like, I talked to Darren Pittman a lot before I got in it, and he was just like, dude, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And the car just, he would tighten the car up, but it wouldn't tighten the car up. The thing would just still turn left, but the right rear would be underneath me. And it was always turning left, which is a super comfortable feeling.
Now, you also told us the program was a lot like Ferkel's, which obviously made Sam.
It felt like I was running Rick Ferkel 2.0, buddy. Yes. Their whole operation is, it reminds me exactly of those days right there. He's just such an old school guy. Like, that car is the only car in the pit area that's got AFCO by Bennick on it. Those shocks are probably straight from 1999. Like, and what's ironic though is whenever I ran the races with Jimmy Carr in the 14, what shocks do we have on, Dom? Pros. That's right. And those are by far the two best sprint cars that I've ever driven. Was the TSR 14 on twin tube Pros and the 69K on twin tube AFCOs.
Well, FK is not sponsoring this show.
I have FKs in my micro, so.
So, what's funny is when Jimmy came to work with me, like, obviously there was a lot of conversation about the 14 and what he did there. And he's like, man, he goes, I just really like Pros. I like oil shocks. And he made the big decision when he came here, because like, I was on Canes, but I had no, it wasn't like I was on a deal or anything. I'm happy to buy them. Willie makes a great product. And he goes, I want to get some oil shocks. And we got, the oil Canes. And that 2021, when we won a bunch of races, it was probably very similar to how you ran the 14. I mean, with how he ran it, it's like you're saying, you create grip. Like, when you get on the gas pedal on a car that's good, I feel like, you can get on the gas on some cars and you spin the tires. Other cars, when you get on the gas, I feel like the car just sets into the racetrack and starts driving. And when you have that feeling, there's nothing like it in the world. And it's funny that he gets it on oil shocks. Now we kind of run everything, but it was amazing. Like, I mean, he literally took what he was doing on the 14 and brought it right to me, and I felt better than I had in my entire life.
So it's so interesting talking about this. Like, Ferkel, do you remember Ferkel talking about shocks, Sam? And he's like, oh, you don't need shocks. Shocks aren't set up. And, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, Rick
Rick wasn't using a dyno.
The funny thing I always tell people about Rick, and like, if it's funny, like, Doug with Doug Berryman was at OC Shocks back then, but Rick would always come in with these two big screwdrivers. And, he would argue with Doug for so long about what this shock was. And Rick would take these screwdrivers and up and down with the shock, and there ain't no way that's a 5 or, whatever, and Doug, Rick would leave, and then Doug goes, man, it's on the dyno, Sam. How can he not understand this? And I was like, man, I said, Rick has his way, man. That's how he's done it for years, But that was Rick, man. We went to Williams Grove one night, and we go out to qualify, and I am like lightning fast, and I come in, and the left rear shock fell off the car in qualifying. Like, it was not on there. I got back, and he's like, see, I told you, you don't need a shock. You don't need no shock. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that could ever happen, because now Rick's so convinced that we don't need a left rear shock. And like, we're at Williams Grove. He's like, see, Sammy, you were wide open. You went around there. You didn't need a shock. Danny Lasowski won Knoxville Nationals out of left rear shock. He's telling me all this stuff, and I'm losing it. But, that was Rick. Like, he said, Sam, shocks are just dampeners. That's what he would tell me all the time.
The other thing I remember about Rick, and I think he was starting to give in at the end of his career, so let me know if I'm talking out of turn. Rick also did not buy into dirty air at all.
No.
They didn't exist.
Nope.
It did not exist.
He would call that mental weakness. That's what he would call it.
So I would love, trying to watch races with him, and you're watching sprint car races, and you see this guy just follow him and take off up the racetrack. I'm like, Rick, why'd that happen? Oh, he just missed the corner. He's in traffic. He missed the corner. I'm like, come on, Rick.
Yeah, he would say that. I go, well, what do you call it then, Rick? It's called traffic. That's what he would say. Exactly.
But, yeah. Oh, Rick. So then the other question I wanted to ask you, obviously, Sam, we did that reel of Sam talking through the last 3 laps against Larson there.
Love that, by the way. That was awesome content.
Thank you, sir. Could you take us through the last 3 laps from your perspective in a more advanced way than you would generally just say it?
100%.
Like what was running through your head?
So my favorite part of watching races is to put myself in their spot, and you see that exact scenario play out, and you're like, okay, what do you do here? If I'm leading the race, what am I going to do? If I'm running second, what am I going to do? And I remember it super clear. We're coming in there. There's 3 laps to go. So A, we're definitely not going to get to traffic. B, you're not going to have to worry about your tires getting hot. It's basically, a qualifying session. And the thing that was really, really screwing me up was that the lanes were so equal. So most of the time on a half mile, if there's a yellow with 8 or less laps left, the race is over. The guy who's in clean air is going to win 95% of the time, right? But what was unique about that race at Volusia is that there were equal lanes. The top and the bottom were very equal. So I'm sitting there in the car, and I'm thinking, okay, if I can just get him screwed up, I'm going to win, but he's going to go opposite of me, right? So if I go to the top, he's going to go to the bottom. And if I go to the bottom, he's going to go to the top. He's going to have clean air. So I don't think I'm going to be able to shake him like this. And I really started to struggle on the top throughout the course of the race. The longer the race went, the tighter I got against the cushion. And the 27 had just blown my doors off on the bottom. So I'm like, I don't really feel confident just committing to the curb and, running up there without getting tight. And I just run the bottom. So I'm like, okay, I feel like I can hit the bottom and be good. But what I didn't want to do was give Kyle a bunch of momentum on the start. So I was like, my right rear is going to be a little bit lower after this yellow. So lap 1, turn 1, I'm going to slide across the best that I can. I'm going to slide across the racetrack, hopefully dirty up his air a little bit. And then turn 3, I originally was planning on going to the top of 3 and 4 because there was less of a curb, and there really wasn't many options in 3 and 4. The bottom was too slick to try and stick. So I knew that I had to be on the top in 3 and 4 if you wanted to have any pace at all. So they dropped the rag, they dropped the green flag. I go into turn 1, and this thing is like stuck. Like it is turning left through the corner, and I cut a pretty good lap in the middle, but I don't slide all the way up to the top, which at the time I thought it was good. But looking back at it, I think I would have been better off if I would have covered his lane and taken his air away, and it probably would have taken his momentum away. But I kind of shade up, and then I start to come back down the racetrack because I didn't want to enter turn 3 really wide and give him the bottom. And so I entered 3 lower. I slid across the racetrack, and he, obviously ran high. And then at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm going to try and run the best laps that I can on the bottom of 1 and 2. And I'm still thinking that I'm going to go to the top of 3 and 4. But what I didn't account for was how slick the back straightaway was. So the back straightaway is round and it's slick. So for me to come off the bottom of 2 and then try and get to the top of 3 without dropping my left rear and sliding and losing all my momentum, I'm like, I can't do that. That's not going to happen. So I'm like, okay, run the bottom, and I get off the bottom good. I'm like, well, shit, I can't run the bottom of 3 and 4. What am I going to do now? And I'm like, well, my only option is to slide across and try and carry as much momentum as I could. And so my line became predictable after the first or second time doing it, but I'm like, I'm committed at this point. I'm going to do the bottom 1 and 2. I can't go to the top of 3 because I know he's going to slide me. I'm going to go to the bottom of 3 and slide across and hopefully exit in the grip out of 4. And I said, if he's going to beat me, he's going to beat me. But that's what I got. That's how I can run the best laps possible for my car in those conditions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, when I watched the restart, I was like totally surprised where you went and why you went. I was like, man, all he's got to do is run the top, because I didn't think, and you can't see behind you, but I didn't think Larson was good enough on the bottom to, if you went to the top, I didn't think he could make up the time on the bottom like you could in 1 and 2. So I felt like, man, he's got this in the bag. He's just going to run 3 around the top, and it'll be over. And it's what surprised me, because when you did what you did, obviously he got a really good run off of 2 every time. And I felt like you knew that when you got off of 2, you got in the middle of back straightaway and you thought, man, I'm not making enough smoke to roll to the top here. I got to cover my ass, get in lower in 3 and slide across. And it was, I don't know, it wasn't what I was expecting, but for you to make it work for the 3 laps the way you did, I mean, it was just enough. I mean, you beat him by, I don't know, half a car across the line. So I guess that was enough. But I was just like, oh, he's just going to roll 3 on the top. This race is over. And then, I was like, oh, wow, he went there. And I thought it was going back to the race. I don't think people realize this, but when you've been out of a 410 wing sprint car for that long and to come back and just look as polished as you did, I was very impressed with that. I thought it was, obviously you're in a really good race car. That does help too, but so are a lot of guys, it's just impressive to me that you did as well as you did being out of a 410 car for that long. Did you guys, when's the last time you actually drove a 410 sprint car around a racetrack before that?
Yeah, so the last time that I raced was 2022. I went to PA Speed Week with Swindell, and the last time I ran was Port Royal. So that was the last time I raced. And then we did go to a track in North Carolina the day before Volusia, and I got a handful of laps there. So, yeah.
No, I just thought it was impressive. Really impressive.
So there's a lot of crossover between NASCAR and sprint car in terms of crews. A lot of sprint car guys have ended up on NASCAR teams. A lot of NASCAR crew guys pay attention to the World of Outlaws. What is something, Christopher, that you think sprint car people could maybe learn from the NASCAR world in terms of crews and stuff like that?
So one thing that I have that is so cool about the NASCAR stuff is like the crew chiefs and the engineers they are so smart and so dialed in on every little detail. And like especially the aero side, like I feel like the aero side of dirt track racing is so raw and untapped. And it like you go the NASCAR teams they're literally wind tunneling like as much as they can. There's rules on it now, but they're counting downforce to like the single counts of downforce that really matter. And sprint car racing, like people are just throwing wickers at the car because they think that a 2-inch wicker creates more downforce than a 1-inch wicker, and they think that a no wicker creates less drag than a 1-inch wicker. But none of that, I don't think, has ever really been scienced out and proven. And then on top of that, you have like the 69K wing where the sideboards all the way drop. You have guys that run their right side sideboards up a little bit. You have left sideboards forward, right sideboards back. And I don't feel like any of that is scienced out. Like it's all just kind of what feels best. And so I think that there could be huge gains made in especially specifically the aero side on the sprint car stuff.
So we're winding down now. One thing I noticed going back and watching your videos is particularly at Eldora in the 14 car, you were lights out at Eldora. And you had 2 really, really good shots to win the King's Royal.
Yeah, those were the ones that got away, Daryl.
Yes, the one you were running down shots and crashed, I believe. And the other one you started a mile back and were running him down but ran out of time. Does it bother you that you don't have a crown jewel win in the 410s?
It doesn't bother me. But in the moment, I remember those Kings Royals like they were yesterday. And I think I had 3 years that I ran the Kings Royal in the TSR 14. The first year was the year I crashed. The second year was the year we blew up in the heat race and had to use our qualifying time provisional. And the race went green to checkered. So that was the year I came from whatever to run second to Donnie. And then the third year I blew up in the feature, unfortunately. But so you're going through that spell and you're like, man, I'm going to get one of these years. I'm going to get one of these years. And then the year came where I didn't race it anymore. And then it's like, well, shoot, I don't know that hopefully I will get the opportunity to go back there, at some point in my career, but am I going to be as good of a driver in at that time that I was back then? I never felt like that was my last shot. And looking back at it, like it very well could have been my last shot. And so in the moment, I didn't feel like it was that big of a loss, but looking back at it, it certainly was.
So then the other question I have to ask is, a lot of people don't know this, but after your win at Volusia, and I talked about this on the podcast, there was a team that made a comment that you guys were a half-mile car, like that,
yes.
The 69K.
Yes.
And it seemed like person didn't, I don't think, meant to insult you at all.
No, they didn't. No, it was Brad. It was Brad Sweet. We were talking about it at the dash draw, and he's like, man, this car is it's made to run half miles. Their whole package is built around half miles. And he's like, I'd hate to run this thing at a quarter mile. Like it probably wouldn't turn. So I went back and I told Don, I said, Don, we're going to Kokomo, bud. We're going to Kokomo. We're going to Hofstadt. We're going to Jacksonville. We're going to these short tracks. We got to get ourselves one here. And I honestly, I razzed the whole Kreitz family, like Don and Cassidy, because they buy into that a little bit too. Like they have their 69K tracks. That's Port Royal. That's the Grove. Like that's what they like to do. And I'm like, guys, we can go anywhere. Like I don't know how it'll be if we show up to Kokomo or if we show up to a short track, but I darn sure want to give it a shot. And I think he's a smart enough crew chief that he could figure it out. But I'm going to do my best to push them outside of their comfort zone and go to non-69K tracks and see how we go.
Are you going to run Tulare after Vegas?
No, unfortunately, I'm not going to get to run Tulare. They are going to Vegas, though. I'm sure you know that. We're going to Vegas. So I'll run the car Thursday night in Vegas, and then Darren Pittman is going to run the car Saturday night in Vegas. So I don't get my first time at Tulare yet, but hopefully one of these days.
You just have to come do it in the 41.
You were talking about Kreitz going outside of his bubble. That final night at Volusia really was pretty sad for more ways than people realize. They pretty much told you if you heard anything, they were done for the night. And they actually put in a pretty big effort for you, didn't they?
Oh my gosh, Daryl, yes. So the first night at Volusia, I got a flat tire in the feature, like lap 3 or 4. And my micro sprint stuff, like I do the same thing. Like if I go out there or any of my drivers go out there, I'm like, hey guys, there is no work area. Like we're not here points racing. Like if something happens, we're rolling in the trailer. We'll, try again another day. So we get the flat tire lap 3 or 4, and I truly expected to be done. And they come out and they put another tire on it. I'm like, okay, well, it was good for me to do it because we were planning on racing, and we're racing more, and it gave me experience to work through traffic and see how the car drove through traffic, work on myself getting through traffic. But then after the race, he says that, he goes, normally I wouldn't do that. We wouldn't put a tire on and go back out. It's just too risky. I don't want to burn up another tire. We'll just, try again another night. I'm like, I completely understand that. And thank you for, letting me get more laps so that I can get my feet back underneath me. So then we show up the last night, and it blew up in hot laps. But it was such a weird night because I go out there to hot lap, and the thing starts slowing down. And then eventually the RPMs are dropping, they're dropping. And then it picks up a vibration. And as soon as it picked up a vibration, it was already in my head. I pull it out of gear, and the thing decells really fast. And I'm just rolling around there. It starts decelling really fast. And then I go to hit the brake, and the brake pedal goes to the firewall. And then the engine's off. And as it's coming to a stop, I hear grinding. And I'm like, oh crap. Something's going on with the brakes. The engine's fine. We just got to get this rotor fixed or whatever. I guess the rotor had slid into the caliper, right? You've seen that before? Yeah. So we come in, and I'm like, the brakes, there's something wrong with the brakes. So they start beating the rotor back in the middle of the caliper. And then I push out to qualify, and sure enough, the engine is broke. It doesn't run. So I thought our night was over for sure. And they're like, no, heck no, we're gonna change this engine and try again. So they changed the engine, and we go back out for the heat race. And lap 2 of the heat race, the rear end disintegrates. So it was just a night from hell. We lost an engine, a rear end, and had brake issues all at the same time.
So I only have one question left for him. Is there any other questions you guys want to ask him?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, you mentioned, you said you felt like you sucked at Knoxville. And obviously you've had a lot of success at Eldora, half mile place. What do you feel like when you go to Knoxville versus, some other places that you've had success at? What do you feel like? I don't know. What do you feel like you're not good at Knoxville, I guess is my question. Or at least in the past.
Yeah. So Knoxville has it's been really hard for me. And the cars that I've driven there, they've been really hard to drive. I go to Eldora and I feel in control when my car's good. I feel in control, and I just haven't had that at Knoxville. My best opportunity was probably in the TSR car, and we just came off of a successful Kings Royal. And I think Jimmy, have you talked to Jimmy about this, Dom?
No.
Okay. So I just remember he hit on something that worked really good at Eldora whenever the track was really polished off and slick. And we tried to run that at Knoxville, and it made the car really hard to drive. And I just wasn't good. Honestly, the best that I've ever felt at Knoxville was with Donnie Cooper in the 01. I didn't make the race that year, but that was the best that I felt there. I I don't know. Like I haven't, every time I've run Knoxville in every car besides the Donnie Cooper car, like I'm just out of breath. I'm winded. I feel like I'm fighting the car around the racetrack. And I don't know why that is, other than, maybe we just, I haven't driven a car that's hit the setup there. But it's got my number so far.
Christopher, before we did the interview, you were saying to not even bother talking about Atlanta because you feel like the dirt crowd just doesn't care. But what is something that the dirt crowd sells NASCAR short on?
That is a great question. I'm glad you asked that, Daryl. So one thing that it makes me a little bit sad, the hatred that comes from, the dirt track community to NASCAR, or not even really hatred, but just dislike. And there are like Atlanta, Talladega, Daytona, like those are not good races by a normal traditional racing standpoint. But you go to some racetracks like, the intermediates or Dover, or short tracks like Richmond and, Phoenix, it is real racing. Like you're not going to fake your way around those racetracks and be good. It takes skill. You have to drive the car properly. You have to have the right setup. You have to have the right strategy. You have to have a good pit crew. And it is real racing. Like you're not going to fake your way into a win around there. And the guys that win at those style racetracks are really, really good.
So the way we end every podcast, and I didn't prepare you for it, is we talk shit about something. And I haven't prepared you at all. Is there something in racing that just really bothers you that you want to get off your chest?
Yes, there is. The fuel stop. The dreaded fuel stop. It is the worst thing ever. And really, the fuel stop it's unbearable. Like, whenever I'm sitting there watching on TV, like I can't stand fuel stops. I have this acronym PSG, and that's please stay green. Like, please stay green. We do not want a fuel stop here. So hate fuel stops. Absolutely hate them. Knoxville, the 50 lap race at Knoxville, complete garbage. The fuel stop, the tire break, like, no, you gotta have long green flag runs. Like, I would much rather see a 40 lap race, a 35 lap race goes green rather than 25 lap stints.
Yeah, I hate that too. Like, I always think like this year, Larson's out front and we're getting to the halfway mark and it looks like the race is about to get maybe interesting. And then suddenly, okay, we got a reset. And then right when they do that, like it will not make the race any better. There's not a guy running second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth that's going to gain enough on this stop to hunt this guy down, because you've already got a guy leading the race. And now his crew's got to come over to him and tell him everything the guys are doing behind him. So then he's got 25 laps to just, like, I think it's terrible too. I think it's the worst thing they've done. I liked the thought of it when they first came out. I thought, oh man, 50 laps. Okay, that'll be cool. Maybe it'll make the race interesting. And then it's like, no, I think it's made the race terrible. I really do. I mean, you could say a couple of the years were like the Jason Johnson race, that was badass. Donnie Schatz coming from deep, it's badass. But I don't know, the year Donnie won from the B was pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't, for one, we're having technical issues with Dom. He can hear everything we're saying. He just texted me and said, amen, F the Knoxville stop. It screws the entire race up. But the other thing I think is, like, I don't think people realize how good the race could be if it ended on lap 30 still. Like, the last year Donnie Schatz won, like, Tyler Courtney was leading around, like, lap 27, 28, 29, I want to say. I'm going off memory completely. But that was considered a boring year. But if that was a 30-lap race, Courtney and I believe Gravel would have been down to it with one or two.
Here's my thing. I think if you're going to make a stop, And I think it could be, you could have a stop, but it can only be fuel only. I might go with that because I think it's.
So, but what about driver team communication? Are you saying limit that too?
Yeah, limit. I think you limit all that. Like, I feel like you got one guy with the fuel jug that rolls out, and it can't be Paul Silva on the 57. It has to be somebody else. It can't be Ricky Warner with Rico. Like, I feel like that would be the ideal situation. I think, I don't know. I think it kills the race. Like, everybody's so good that if you tell them something, I don't feel like. That's it. I just feel like it's going to make another 25 laps of boring racing.
So I actually never even thought about that piece of the puzzle, Sam, but I completely agree. Just having that opportunity for your crew guy, and I've lived it. Like, I've lived it many of times where you're leading a race and you're kind of not sure on where to go, and they're like, "Hey, the guy behind you is running the top." They're like, "Oh, done. I'm just going to run the top for however many laps." Like. That is, and I don't know, even with a fuel only stop, like the guy dumping the fuel can he's going to yell at you, he's running the top behind you or whatever.
Right.
I think that is a huge element of dirt track racing that, makes it super entertaining. And
yeah. And I was going to say, Dom just said, don't rework the track. Well, that's not normal. I don't feel like they've done that a bunch. Like, I saw they did it a lot this last year, but I mean, to be honest, that race is way better when the track's dog shit, to be honest. Like, I feel like the elite cars, they really make moves when they have the track super, super slick. I want to say, like, one year, Schuhart came from deep, and I don't know, where did he run, Daryl?
One year,
a couple of years ago. Yeah, I think he came from like 21st to second, maybe, something like that. Something.
Yeah. Dom is verifying he's saying second.
Yeah, like, you guys are statisticians. I'm not. But like, I remember watching that race thinking, man, the track's so wide right now. It's actually allowing these elite race cars that can get grip when other guys can't to really get through there. And I feel like the rework, I think, is terrible. Obviously, they can't let it go like they did the 360 track this year, but, to a certain extent, keep the rework out too. I agree with Dom 100% on that.
Yeah, and I would also be really curious to go back, and everyone will tell you 2016 with Jason Johnson was like an elite Knoxville Nationals. I have a feeling if we go back and look at the situation on lap 30, that still would have been a badass Knoxville Nationals.
Yeah, most likely.
What? But your lap 30? Are you talking? Is that like before the fuel stop or like 5 laps after?
Well, like I'm going with lap 30.
Just saying, no fuel.
That's what the race was before they did fuel stops.
Yeah.
That's just what they did pre-fuel stop. That's why I keep picking lap 30 is
because don't you think like this year, Carson Macedo was really going to have a shot at him?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And then we have the fuel stop, and then Carson Macedo is a non-factor anymore.
And then I think you guys can both say this racing. Usually if you're not good in the first half of a race, there's no like turning a wrench on the 5-minute break that saves it. Like, you're bad because you're bad. Like, it's beyond what you're going to fix in 5 minutes. You had to rethink everything you were doing. It is not change some stagger and bring the right rear in. Like, you're in trouble, period. There's no one.
Yeah, even the year Schatz won from the B. He was faster the first half of the race by so much. I feel like they slowed him down the second half. I don't think Brown got way slower. Like, I'm just saying, like, I don't think Brown got slower as much as, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Donnie was inhaling cars the first half of that race. It was unbelievable. Now, would he have won the race in 30? I don't know. Maybe not, but he got the second pretty quick. Even if they just had a caution, it would have been game over. You know what I'm saying?
I think he got the lead on lap 41, but that's going off memory.
Yeah, your memory's pretty good about shit like that, though, Daryl. I wouldn't.
But no, I think you have a good one, Christopher. Pete Turford right now is just praising you. Pete Turford cannot stand how long sprint car races are taking. He cannot stand. Sam can tell you, my dad was at Volusia going and taking naps between the heat races and the feature. Like
the one night he didn't even go.
Yeah, like that happens. Like most of your fans are older people. Like that's the sad reality of racing is a lot of the fans are older. They don't want to be up till midnight. They don't want to be up till 1 o'clock watching that stuff. And there isn't a race fan on the planet that doesn't start groaning when they see the World of Outlaws or High Limit calling for that fuel stop. There's not a person in the place that's not groaning. But I don't know. What do you do when guys are being clowns? And I always remember Sam and we almost won at Williams Grove one year. But like, one of the things that happened was we had so many crashes in the first 3 laps that guys were running out of fuel like that quickly. And I don't know that you go to bigger fuel cells, but
yeah, this debate's been huge forever.
But I think on Christopher's side, you have to be a lot more strict about giving out those fuel stops. I want to see guys running out before I see a fuel stop.
I don't know what the answer is because I'm not a fan of bigger fuel cells. I don't think that some people like it, but that is an element to NASCAR racing that I really enjoy. How whenever there is a stoppage, the race continues on, right? Like they count yellow flags, and that's not an element that we can do in sprint car racing because the races are relatively short. But I do enjoy that aspect that like whenever once the race starts, like it's going, and it's not stopping. They're counting laps until we get to the checkered flag. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but having the dreaded fuel stop it's a problem.
Yeah, and it just kills the flow of a race. I'm just going to check my text. Dom, do you have anything to add to that before we call our night here? Big fuel cells suck.
I agree.
Okay, so Christopher, thanks for doing this. Hope you enjoyed it. Sam, Dom, thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Thank you, boys.